The judge's voice echoed through the silent courtroom as he read the final line of what I believed was my grandmother's last will and testament. My sister Amanda shot up from her chair, her face glowing with victory, as she turned toward me with the cruelest smile I had ever seen. "Finally, your house is mine," she declared, her voice carrying across the mahogany-paneled room like a slap across my face. The sound of my parents' applause filled the air as they rushed to embrace her, their faces beaming with pride and satisfaction. I sat frozen in my chair, my world crumbling around me as everything I had sacrificed, every promise my grandmother had made, seemed to dissolve into nothing. The silence stretched until the judge looked up with a puzzled expression. Judge Morrison's weathered face creased into a deep frown as he examined the documents before him. There appear to be some discrepancies in these witness signatures. He announced, his voice cutting through the celebration that had erupted around Amanda. "The dates don't align properly with the notarization stamps." My heart lurched back to life as I processed his words. The applause died, instantly replaced by an uncomfortable stillness that filled the ornate courtroom. Afternoon sunlight streamed through the tall windows, casting long shadows across the polished wooden floors, where just moments before my entire world had been shattered. I am Deirdre Walsh, 32 years old, and until this moment I had believed my life's greatest sacrifice was about to be rewarded. For 15 years, I had been the granddaughter who stayed. While Amanda built her glamorous life in California as a real estate agent, married to her wealthy husband Brad, I had chosen a different path entirely. When I was 17 and heading to college, Grandmother Rose had begun showing the first signs of her declining health. Multiple sclerosis was stealing her mobility bit by bit, and someone needed to be there for her daily care. Without hesitation, I moved into her beautiful Victorian home, the same house that had sheltered 4 generations of our family since 1892. My parents, Robert and Patricia, had always made their preferences crystal clear. Amanda was their shining star, the daughter who had achieved everything they valued. She lived in Beverly Hills, drove expensive cars, and sent them photos from fancy restaurants and vacation resorts. I was the practical one, the daughter who worked as a marketing director for a small firm downtown, who chose responsibility over adventure. The sacrifices had been enormous. I turned down job offers in New York and Seattle, opportunities that could have transformed my career trajectory completely. When my boyfriend Marcus received a promotion that required relocating to Denver, I chose to stay with Grandmother Rose rather than follow my heart across the country. Our relationship ended with tears and promises to stay in touch, promises that eventually faded into occasional holiday cards. But Grandmother Rose had made me promises too. During countless evenings when I helped her with physical therapy exercises, prepared her medications, and listened to her stories about our family's history, she would pat my hand and say, "Deirdre, this house will be yours someday. You've earned it through your love and dedication." The house itself was magnificent, a testament to Victorian craftsmanship, with its wraparound porch, ornate woodwork, and stained glass windows that painted rainbow patterns across the hardwood floors when the sun hit them just right. Every room held memories from the kitchen, where Grandmother Rose taught me her secret recipes, to the library, where we spent quiet afternoons reading together. Amanda visited perhaps 3 times in the past 5 years, always with an excuse about her busy schedule or Brad's demanding business ventures. She would breeze in for a few hours, take some photos for social media, and disappear again into her California lifestyle. Meanwhile, I coordinated doctor appointments, managed medications, and held Grandmother Rose's hand during her worst days. Now sitting in this courtroom, I watched my family's true dynamics play out in harsh fluorescent lighting. My parents had actually applauded when Amanda claimed ownership of everything I had worked to preserve. Attorney Harrison Walsh, who had been our family lawyer for 30 years, sat rigidly in his chair, avoiding eye contact with everyone in the room. "I'm ordering a 2-week investigation into the authenticity of this document." Judge Morrison continued, his voice firm and authoritative. All parties will be notified of the hearing date to reconvene once we have conclusive evidence about the validity of these signatures. Amanda's triumphant expression cracked slightly around the edges, but she quickly recovered her composure. "Of course, Your Honor," she said smoothly. "I'm confident everything will be verified as completely legitimate." My parents exchanged worried glances, but Patricia quickly moved to Amanda's side, placing a protective arm around her shoulders. "There must be some simple explanation," she murmured loud enough for me to hear. Amanda would never do anything dishonest. As we filed out of the courtroom, I caught Attorney Walsh's eye. Something flickered there, a combination of guilt and fear that sent cold chills down my spine. This man had known our family for 3 decades, had drawn up contracts for my parents' business ventures, and handled Grandmother Rose's affairs for years. His discomfort seemed far too intense for simple paperwork errors. Walking through the courthouse lobby, I felt completely isolated despite being surrounded by my family members. They clustered around Amanda, discussing dinner plans and celebration strategies as if I had simply vanished from existence. The marble floors echoed with their voices, but none of them were directed toward me. Outside on the courthouse steps, Amanda finally approached me directly. Her designer heels clicked confidently against the stone as she positioned herself between me and the afternoon sun. "I hope you understand that this is just business, Deirdre," she said, her tone attempting sympathy, but missing the mark entirely. "Grandmother obviously realized that I'm in a better position to maintain the property value and make smart investment decisions." The words hit me like physical blows. Investment decisions, property value. She was already talking about our family heritage as if it were nothing more than a financial portfolio to be managed. "Amanda." I started my voice barely above a whisper. "Grandmother promised me that house. I gave up everything to take care of her." "Promises change," she replied with a shrug that seemed to dismiss 15 years of my life. "Legal documents are what matter now. You'll figure something out. You always do." 2 days after the hearing, I found myself alone in Grandmother Rose's house, the silence pressing against my ears like a physical weight. Every room whispered memories of conversations we had shared, promises she had made, and the life I had built within these walls. The investigation Judge Morrison had ordered gave me a temporary reprieve, but the uncertainty was eating away at my resolve. I decided to start with the hospital records from Grandmother Rose's final weeks. As her primary caregiver, I had access to all her medical files, and something about Amanda's behavior in the courtroom nagged at me relentlessly. She had seemed too confident, too prepared for what should have been an emotional family moment. At Riverside General Hospital, the records clerk, a middle-aged woman named Susan, with kind eyes and gentle hands, pulled up the visitor logs from Grandmother Rose's final admission. What I discovered there made my blood run cold. "Your sister visited 3 times during the last week," Susan explained, pointing to the entries on her computer screen. "Once on Tuesday evening around 9 o'clock again on Thursday afternoon, and finally on Saturday morning, just 2 days before your grandmother passed." My hands trembled as I processed this information. Amanda had specifically told our parents, the attorneys, and me that she had been unable to make it to the hospital during those final days because of a crucial real estate closing in Los Angeles. She had claimed that by the time she could arrange to fly out, Grandmother Rose was too heavily medicated to have coherent conversations. Was she alone during these visits? I asked, my voice barely steady. Susan checked the notes attached to each entry. The Tuesday and Saturday visits show she was accompanied by an older gentleman, signed in as Franklin Morris. Thursday, she came by herself. Franklin Morris. The name meant nothing to me, but something about it felt significant. I thanked Susan and drove home with my mind racing through possibilities, none of them comforting. Back at the house, I began searching through Grandmother Rose's papers more systematically than I had ever done before. Her bedroom had always been her sanctuary, filled with antique furniture, passed down through generations, and personal mementos that told the story of her remarkable life. Hidden beneath a stack of medical bills in her mahogany secretary desk, I found correspondence that made my heart stop completely. 3 letters all addressed to someone named Franklin Morris at a law office across town, all dated within the month before Grandmother Rose's death. The first letter was in Grandmother Rose's shaky handwriting. "Mr. Morris, I am writing to inform you that I have not requested any changes to my will and do not wish to meet with you regarding my estate planning. Please stop calling my home." The second letter typed on official letterhead, "Mrs. Brennan, I believe there may have been a misunderstanding. Your granddaughter, Amanda, has expressed concerns about your current estate planning and believes a meeting would benefit all parties involved." The third letter, again in Grandmother Rose's handwriting, but much shakier. "I am feeling very confused about these legal matters. Amanda says you can help clarify things, but I don't remember asking for help. Please give me time to think." My hands shook as I read these exchanges. The timeline was becoming clearer and more sinister with each piece of evidence. Amanda had somehow connected with this Franklin Morris and was pressuring our dying grandmother to change her will during her most vulnerable moments. A knock at the front door interrupted my investigation. Through the lace curtains, I could see Mrs. Henderson from next door holding a covered casserole dish and wearing the concerned expression that had become familiar since the funeral. Eleanor Henderson was 80 years old, sharp as a tack, and had been Grandmother Rose's closest friend and neighbor for over 20 years. She had watched me grow up, had celebrated my college graduation from her front porch, and had brought soup during every one of Grandmother Rose's hospital stays. "Deirdre, honey," she said as I opened the door, "I've been thinking about what happened at the courthouse, and there are some things I need to tell you." We settled in the living room where Grandmother Rose's favorite armchair still held the indent of her frail body. Mrs. Henderson's weathered hands clutched her teacup as she began to share what she had witnessed during those final weeks. "Your grandmother seemed very agitated during her last month. She began slowly. I would see her pacing in her bedroom late at night, and several times she came to my back fence just to talk. She kept saying someone was pressuring her to sign papers, but she couldn't remember who or why." The words hit me like hammer blows. Grandmother Rose had been suffering, confused and frightened, while I focused on her medical care and missed the signs of this deeper manipulation. "There's more, dear," Mrs. Henderson continued. "I saw Amanda arguing with your grandmother on the front porch one evening. It was the Thursday before Rose passed, and their voices were raised high enough that I could hear them through my open windows." "What were they arguing about?" "Amanda kept saying something about protecting the family assets and making sure everyone gets what they deserve. Your grandmother was crying, saying she had already made her decisions and didn't want to discuss it anymore. Amanda stormed off afterward, and Rose sat on that porch swing until well past midnight." The picture was becoming horrifyingly clear. Amanda had used Grandmother Rose's declining mental state and medication confusion to manipulate her into signing documents she didn't understand. The 3 hospital visits made perfect sense now. Amanda had been working with this Franklin Morris to create opportunities for coercion when Grandmother Rose was most vulnerable. "Mrs. Henderson," I asked carefully, "did you ever see this Franklin Morris person?" "Oh, yes, several times. Tall gentleman with silver hair and an expensive car. He came to the house with Amanda twice that I saw and once by himself. Your grandmother seemed very upset after his solo visit." That evening I called the nursing service that had provided Grandmother Rose's home care during her final months. Beverly Patterson, the primary nurse, had worked with our family for over 2 years and had developed a genuine affection for Grandmother Rose. "I was wondering when someone would ask about those last few weeks," Beverly said when I explained my concerns. "Your grandmother's anxiety levels were through the roof, and she kept talking about people trying to trick her into signing things. She specifically mentioned being worried about Amanda's visits." "Did she say anything specific about the visits?" "She told me Amanda brought a lawyer to the house and they kept asking her to sign papers. Rose said she felt pressured and confused, especially with all the pain medications affecting her thinking. She asked me several times if she could change her mind about things she had signed." The conversation confirmed my worst fears. Amanda had deliberately targeted Grandmother Rose during her most vulnerable moments, using her pain and medication confusion to manipulate her into changing her will. The woman who had sacrificed everything to care for our grandmother was being systematically robbed by the granddaughter who couldn't be bothered to visit. As night fell over the Victorian house that had been my home for 15 years, I sat in Grandmother Rose's bedroom and made a decision that would change everything. I was going to find that original will, the real one, that reflected her true wishes. And I was going to make sure Amanda's betrayal was exposed for exactly what it was. The floorboards creaked softly as I moved around the room, remembering every story Grandmother Rose had told me about the house's hidden spaces and secret compartments. This old Victorian held more secrets than just family memories, and somewhere within these walls lay the truth that would restore justice to our family. 3 days into my investigation, I remembered something crucial that Grandmother Rose had told me years ago during one of our quiet evening conversations. She'd been reminiscing about her own childhood in this house, describing how her father had built secret compartments throughout the Victorian structure to hide important documents during the Great Depression. "Every old house has its secrets, Deirdre," she had said with a mysterious smile. "Someday I'll show you where your great-grandfather hid the family treasures." That conversation had taken place when I was in college, and life had moved so quickly afterward that we never found time for her to reveal those hiding places. Now desperate for answers, I began systematically examining every piece of furniture in her bedroom for concealed spaces. The mahogany vanity table where she had sat every morning to brush her silver hair caught my attention immediately. Its ornate Victorian design featured elaborate carved details and a large circular mirror that could be tilted at different angles. As I ran my hands along the wooden frame searching for hidden mechanisms, my fingers found a small lever disguised as decorative scrollwork. When I pressed it, a soft click echoed through the quiet room, and a narrow drawer slid out from behind the mirror's backing. Inside, wrapped in yellow tissue paper, lay a thick envelope bearing my name in Grandmother Rose's careful cursive handwriting. My heart hammered against my ribs as I carefully opened the envelope. Inside was the real will dated 6 months before her death, along with a letter that made tears stream down my cheeks as I read her familiar handwriting. "My dearest Deirdre." The letter began, "If you are reading this, then my fears about Amanda's intentions have come to pass. I am writing this while I still have clarity of mind before the medications make me too confused to think properly." The letter continued, "Amanda has been pressuring me to change my will, claiming that you are not capable of maintaining this house properly. She brings a lawyer named Franklin Morris, who makes me feel frightened and confused with legal language I don't understand. I worry that in my weakened state I might be tricked into signing something that goes against my true wishes. I want you to have this house, Deirdre. You have earned it through 15 years of love, sacrifice, and dedication. Amanda chose her path in California, and I pray she finds happiness there. But this house belongs with the granddaughter who chose to build her life within these walls." The real will was comprehensive and clear. It left the Victorian house and its contents to me, along with the majority of her savings account. Amanda was to receive $25,000 in cash and several pieces of valuable jewelry, a generous inheritance, but nothing compared to the property's worth. As I sat on her bedroom floor reading through the legal documents, tears of relief and vindication streaming down my face, I heard the front door slam shut downstairs. Heavy footsteps echoed through the house, moving quickly toward the staircase. "Deirdre." Amanda's voice rang out sharp and demanding. "I know you're up there. We need to talk immediately." Panic flooded through me as I realized she must have seen my car in the driveway and decided to confront me directly. I quickly folded the real will and letter, shoving them into my jacket pocket just as Amanda's footsteps reached the top of the stairs. She appeared in the bedroom doorway, her usually perfect hair disheveled and her designer clothes wrinkled as if she'd been traveling all night. Her eyes were wild with an emotion I had never seen in her before. Desperate fear. "What are you doing in here?" she demanded, scanning the room for signs of my search. I'm going through grandmother's things, I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. There are personal items I want to keep for the memories. Amanda's gaze fixed on the open vanity drawer and her face went completely white. You found it, didn't you? She whispered, her voice barely audible. The pretense crumbled instantly. We stared at each other across the bedroom where our grandmother had spent her final years, and the truth hung between us like a toxic cloud. How could you do this to her? I asked, my voice breaking with emotion. She was dying, Amanda. She was confused and scared, and you used that against her. Amanda's composure shattered completely. You don't understand the pressure I'm under, she shouted, moving toward me with clenched fists. Brad's business is failing, and we owe money to people who don't accept excuses. We need this house, Deirdre. We need the equity to save our lives. So you decided to steal it from a dying woman. I didn't steal anything, she screamed. I convinced her to make a smart financial decision. You're just a single woman with a mediocre job. I have a family to protect responsibilities you couldn't possibly understand. The conversation revealed the depth of her desperation and the complete absence of remorse for what she had done. Amanda truly believed that her needs justified manipulating our dying grandmother, and that frightened me more than her anger. Give me those papers, Deirdre, she demanded, holding out her hand. Whatever you found in there doesn't matter now. The will that was read in court is the legal document. The will that was read in court is a forgery, I replied, backing toward the bedroom door, and Judge Morrison is going to discover that during his investigation. Amanda's face twisted with rage and desperation. You have no idea what you're interfering with, she hissed. Brad owes $300,000 to people who hurt families when they don't get paid. If we lose this house, we lose everything. She lunged toward me, trying to grab my jacket where the real will was hidden. We struggled briefly, knocking over Grandmother Rose's jewelry box and sending pearls scattering across the hardwood floor. I managed to break free and run toward the staircase. This isn't over, Deirdre, Amanda shouted after me. You think you're protecting some family legacy, but you're destroying real lives. I'll do whatever it takes to save my family, and you'd better stay out of my way. I ran to my car and drove straight to the bank where I placed the real will and letter in a safety deposit box. My hands shook as I signed the paperwork, knowing that Amanda's desperation made her dangerous in ways I was only beginning to understand. That night alone in my small apartment across town, I tried to process what had happened. Amanda wasn't just greedy, she was terrified. Her husband's gambling debts had put them in danger, and she saw stealing our grandmother's house as her only escape route. But what terrified me most was her final threat. Amanda had always been manipulative, but I had never seen her willing to use physical force before. The woman who had grabbed at me in Grandmother Rose's bedroom was someone I didn't recognize, someone capable of almost anything to protect what she believed was hers. I double-checked the locks on my apartment door and closed all the curtains before going to bed. Tomorrow, I would take the real will to Judge Morrison and expose Amanda's fraud. But tonight, I needed to stay safe from a sister who had become a stranger, driven by desperation into actions that would have horrified the family we used to be. The next morning brought an aggressive phone call that woke me from restless sleep at 6:30. My father's voice thundered through the receiver, angrier than I had ever heard him. Deirdre, what the hell do you think you're doing? He demanded without any greeting. Amanda called us crying last night, saying you attacked her in Rose's house and stole important documents. I sat up in bed, instantly alert and furious. She told you I attacked her. She said you were acting completely irrational, making wild accusations about forged wills and threatening to destroy the family. Your mother and I are driving over there right now to settle this nonsense once and for all. The phone call set the tone for what became the most difficult day of my life. My parents arrived at my apartment an hour later, flanked by Amanda, who played the role of injured victim with Academy Award precision. She'd somehow managed to bruise her wrist during our brief struggle and displayed it dramatically as evidence of my violent behavior. I'm genuinely worried about Deirdre's mental state, Amanda told our parents while I stood in my own living room feeling like a defendant in some surreal trial. Grief can make people delusional, and she's obviously not processing grandmother's death in a healthy way. My mother, Patricia, nodded sympathetically and reached out to touch Amanda's displayed bruise. "Sweetheart, you don't have to worry about this anymore. We'll handle everything." "I have proof that Amanda forged grandmother's will," I said firmly, but my father cut me off immediately. "Enough!" Robert shouted. "I've heard enough of these conspiracy theories. Amanda is a licensed real estate professional with an impeccable reputation. The idea that she would commit fraud is absolutely ridiculous." What followed was an hour of gaslighting that left me questioning my own sanity. My parents systematically dismissed every concern I raised, reframed every piece of evidence as grief-induced paranoia, and positioned Amanda as the reasonable family member trying to protect everyone from my breakdown. "Deirdre, honey," my mother said in her most patronizing tone, "losing grandmother Rose has been traumatic for all of us. Maybe you should consider talking to someone professional about these feelings you're having." After they left, I felt completely isolated and uncertain about my next steps. Amanda had successfully turned our parents against me by playing victim and questioning my mental stability. It was a masterful manipulation that left me with no family support system. But my resolve hardened when I checked my phone and found 17 missed calls from unknown numbers. When I listened to the voicemail messages, my blood turned to ice. "This message is for Deirdre," a man's gravelly voice said. "You've got something that belongs to people who don't like waiting. Smart girls know when to mind their own business." The remaining messages were variations on the same theme, vague threats about staying out of family business and warnings about what happened to people who interfered with important arrangements. None of the callers identified themselves, but the implication was crystal clear. I immediately contacted the police and filed a report about the threatening calls. Officer Maria Santos, a patient woman in her 40s, took detailed notes and assured me they would investigate the numbers, but she also warned me that without specific threats of violence, there was limited action they could take. "I'd recommend varying your daily routines and staying alert to your surroundings," she advised. "If you receive any more calls or notice anyone following you, contact us immediately." That afternoon, I installed a comprehensive security system in my apartment, complete with cameras, covering all entry points and motion sensors throughout the rooms. The expense strained my budget, but my safety was worth any financial sacrifice. My caution proved justified when the cameras captured something disturbing that very evening. At 11:45, two figures approached my apartment building and spent nearly 20 minutes examining the entrance, checking windows, and apparently looking for the easiest way to break in. The security footage wasn't clear enough to identify faces, but one of the figures was definitely female with Amanda's distinctive height and build. They eventually left without attempting to enter, but their reconnaissance mission was obvious. I called Officer Santos immediately and emailed her the security footage. She agreed it looked suspicious, but pointed out that walking around a building wasn't technically illegal unless they actually attempted to break in. "Keep recording everything," she advised. "If they escalate to actual breaking and entering, we'll have grounds for arrest." The psychological warfare continued over the following days. Amanda began calling our extended family members, spreading carefully crafted stories about my alleged mental instability and violent tendencies. Aunts and uncles who had known me my entire life started reaching out with concerned phone calls asking if I was okay and suggesting I should consider Amanda's generous offer to handle everything. The manipulation was brilliant and devastating. Amanda positioned herself as the responsible family member, trying to protect everyone from my grief-induced breakdown, while simultaneously painting me as an unstable person whose accusations couldn't be trusted. Meanwhile, the threatening phone calls continued sporadically, always from different numbers that traced back to prepaid phones. The callers never crossed the line into specific threats of violence, but they made sure I understood that powerful people wanted me to stop interfering with family business. On Friday evening, my security system recorded its most disturbing footage yet. The same two figures returned, but this time they came prepared with tools. The female figure definitely matched Amanda's profile, and her male companion appeared to be attempting to pick the lock on my building's entrance. I watched the live feed from my bedroom, my heart hammering as they worked on the door for over 10 minutes before apparently giving up and disappearing into the night. This time, their criminal intent was undeniable. I called 911 immediately, and 2 patrol officers responded within minutes. Unfortunately, by the time they arrived, Amanda and her accomplice were long gone. But the security footage provided clear evidence of attempted breaking and entering. "We'll issue a warrant for questioning," Officer Santos assured me when she reviewed the footage the next morning. This crossed the line from harassment into attempted burglary. That afternoon, while I waited for the police to locate Amanda for questioning, I received a phone call that changed everything. Attorney Harrison Walsh, our longtime family lawyer, asked to meet with me privately at his office. "There are things I need to tell you about the will situation," he said nervously. "Things that have been weighing on my conscience since the courthouse hearing." I drove to his office with hope blooming in my chest for the first time in days. Walsh had been uncomfortable during the will reading, and his behavior suggested he knew more about Amanda's scheme than he had admitted. His confession when it came validated every suspicion I had developed about my sister's fraud. "Amanda approached me 6 weeks before your grandmother's death," he admitted, unable to meet my eyes. "She claimed Rose wanted to update her will but was too embarrassed to contact me directly because of her declining mental state." "And you believed her?" "Amanda can be very convincing," he said defensively. "She brought documentation that appeared to show Rose's signature requesting the meeting. I agreed to visit the house to discuss potential changes." Walsh described a meeting with Grandmother Rose that sounded nothing like the woman I had cared for daily. According to his account, she seemed confused and kept asking the same questions repeatedly, but she eventually signed papers updating her will to leave the house to Amanda. "I should have insisted on a more thorough competency evaluation," he admitted. But Amanda assured me that Rose was simply having a bad day and the signatures looked legitimate. "Did you witness her sign the will yourself?" Walsh's face crumpled with guilt. "That's just it. I didn't. Amanda said Rose was too tired for a formal signing ceremony, so I left the papers with instructions for them to be completed later. The documents that came back had Rose's signature and proper witness signatures, so I assumed everything was handled correctly." The confession revealed the extent of Amanda's manipulation. She had convinced a respected attorney to initiate the will change process, then forged all the necessary signatures afterward. The scheme was more sophisticated and premeditated than I had imagined. "I want to make this right," Walsh said finally. "I'll testify about the irregular circumstances if you're willing to pursue legal action." As I drove home from his office, I felt the first stirrings of hope since this nightmare began. Amanda's scheme was unraveling, and the people she had manipulated were beginning to find their courage to speak truth. But I also knew that cornering Amanda would make her even more dangerous. Her desperation was driving increasingly reckless behavior, and I needed to be prepared for whatever desperate measures she might attempt next. That night, I slept with my phone next to my pillow and pepper spray on my nightstand, knowing that the real confrontation was still ahead of us. By Monday morning, I had developed a strategy that would either expose Amanda completely or put me in serious danger. The security footage of her attempting to break into my apartment gave me leverage, but I needed a confession that would hold up in court and convince my parents of her guilt. I called Amanda's phone, steeling myself for what would be the most difficult conversation of my life. When she answered, her voice carried the same false sweetness she had used to manipulate everyone around us. "Deirdre, I'm so glad you called," she said warmly. "I've been hoping we could work this out between sisters without involving lawyers and creating more family drama." "I think you're right," I replied, injecting defeat into my voice. "This whole situation has gotten completely out of hand and I'm exhausted from fighting." The relief in her voice was audible. "I knew you'd see reason eventually. You're too smart to keep pushing conspiracy theories that no one believes anyway." What Amanda didn't know was that I had contacted Detective Reynolds from the Fraud Division, and our entire conversation was being recorded through a cooperation agreement with the District Attorney's Office. The police had been building a case against Franklin Morris for elder abuse in several other inheritance fraud schemes, and my situation provided the evidence they needed to prosecute both of them. I keep thinking about what you said regarding Brad's debts. I continued carefully. You must have been under incredible pressure to take such drastic action. You have no idea, Amanda said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. These people don't accept payment plans or sob stories. When they want their money, they expect results immediately. How did you even know how to change grandmother's will? Amanda laughed bitterly. Franklin Morris handles these situations for desperate families all the time. He explained exactly how to approach elderly relatives who are on heavy medications. The key is timing the conversations when they're most confused and compliant. My stomach churned as she described the deliberate targeting of our vulnerable grandmother, but I forced myself to keep drawing out details. What about the signatures grandmother's handwriting was so shaky near the end? That was the trickiest part, Amanda admitted. Franklin had me practice tracing Rose's signature until I could replicate it perfectly. Then we used her fingerprints from prescription bottles to make the forgery look authentic. The confession was even more damning than I had hoped. Amanda was not only admitting to forging documents, but describing a premeditated scheme to abuse our dying grandmother's trust and mental incapacity. I still can't believe you got her fingerprints, I said, encouraging her to continue. That was actually easy, she replied with disturbing pride. During one of my hospital visits, I brought her favorite tea in a special cup. While she was sleeping, I pressed her fingers against modeling clay to get clean prints. Franklin knew someone who could transfer them onto the legal documents. Detective Reynolds had told me that if Amanda admitted to obtaining fingerprints through deception, it would constitute assault in addition to fraud and elder abuse. Her casual description of manipulating our comatose grandmother was providing evidence for multiple felony charges. The whole thing sounds incredibly complicated, I said. How did you manage to coordinate everything while living in California? Franklin handled most of the paperwork logistics, Amanda explained. I just had to make sure Rose signed the initial documents during my visits. The medications made her so compliant that she barely questioned anything I put in front of her. The recording was capturing everything: Amanda's admission of forgery, her description of exploiting grandmother Rose's medication-induced confusion, her partnership with Franklin Morris in targeting vulnerable elderly victims, and her complete lack of remorse for the emotional and financial abuse. What happens now? I asked, maintaining the pretense that I was surrendering. Now you stop interfering with family business, Amanda said firmly. The house belongs to me legally, and you need to accept that reality. Find your own place and move on with your life. And if I don't agree, Amanda's voice turned cold and threatening, then Brad's associates will help you understand why cooperation is important. These aren't people who respond well to stubbornness, Deirdre. The threat was explicit enough to add intimidation and criminal conspiracy charges to her growing list of legal problems. Amanda had just confessed to multiple felonies while threatening me with violence, all captured on a recording that would be admissible in court. After ending the call, I met with Detective Reynolds and District Attorney Jennifer Martinez to review the recording. Both of them were amazed by how thoroughly Amanda had incriminated herself. This is one of the most complete confessions I've heard in 20 years of fraud investigation, Detective Reynolds said. She admitted to forgery, elder abuse, identity theft, intimidation, and criminal conspiracy. We can arrest her immediately. The arrest warrant was issued that afternoon. Amanda was taken into custody at her hotel, where she had been staying since arriving in town to pressure me into compliance. The look of shock and betrayal on her face when the handcuffs clicked into place was captured by local news cameras, adding public humiliation to her legal consequences. Franklin Morris was arrested simultaneously at his office, where police discovered files documenting similar inheritance fraud schemes targeting elderly clients throughout the county. The investigation revealed a systematic operation that had stolen hundreds of thousands of dollars from vulnerable families over several years. When my parents learned about the arrests from the evening news, they finally began to question the version of events Amanda had been feeding them. The recording of her confession, played during a family meeting at Detective Reynolds' office, shattered their denial completely. My mother wept as she listened to Amanda describe manipulating Grandmother Rose's medicated confusion. My father sat in stunned silence, finally confronting the reality that his favored daughter had committed elder abuse against the woman who had loved her unconditionally. "We owe you an apology," Patricia said through her tears. "We believed Amanda's lies about your mental state instead of listening to your concerns. We failed you completely." The validation felt hollow after everything I had endured, but it was necessary for any hope of family healing. My parents' acknowledgement of their mistakes didn't erase the damage, but it provided a foundation for potential reconciliation. That night, alone in my apartment with the security system finally turned off, I felt the first true peace I had experienced since Grandmother Rose's death. Amanda's scheme had been exposed, justice was beginning to unfold, and the real will would be probated, according to our grandmother's authentic wishes. But the victory felt bittersweet. I had saved the house and exposed the fraud, but the cost had been the complete destruction of my relationship with Amanda and the revelation of my parents' conditional love. The family I had sacrificed everything to preserve had fractured beyond any possibility of returning to what we once were. Amanda's arraignment took place on a gray Thursday morning in the same courthouse where her fraudulent will had been read just 3 weeks earlier. The irony wasn't lost on any of us as we sat in the gallery watching her face Judge Morrison for the second time, but under dramatically different circumstances. She had spent 5 days in county jail waiting bail, and the experience had stripped away every trace of her former arrogance. Her designer clothes had been replaced with an orange jumpsuit. Her perfectly styled hair hung limp and unwashed, and her face carried the haunted expression of someone whose entire world had collapsed. District Attorney Martinez presented the charges methodically: elder abuse, fraud, forgery, identity theft, intimidation, and conspiracy. Each charge carried potential prison time, and the evidence was overwhelming enough that Amanda's attorney, a harried public defender named Thomas Chen, advised immediate plea negotiations. "Your Honor." Attorney Chen addressed the court. "My client would like to enter a guilty plea to avoid the trauma of a lengthy trial for all family members involved." Judge Morrison studied Amanda carefully before responding. "This court has reviewed the evidence, including the defendant's recorded confession and documentation of the systematic abuse perpetrated against Mrs. Rose Brennan. These are serious felonies that targeted a vulnerable elderly woman during her final weeks of life." Amanda stood shakily as the judge continued his remarks. However, the court also recognizes that the defendant appears to show genuine remorse and that her actions were motivated by desperation rather than simple greed. What happened next surprised everyone in the courtroom. Amanda began sobbing uncontrollably, her composure finally cracking completely under the weight of her guilt and consequences. "Your Honor," she said through her tears, "I want to tell everyone how sorry I am, especially my sister Deirdre, who loved our grandmother more than anyone and deserves so much better from our family." Her words continued pouring out in a rush of emotion that seemed completely genuine. "I was terrified about Brad's gambling debts and the people who were threatening our safety. But that doesn't excuse what I did to Grandmother Rose. She trusted me, and I manipulated her when she was dying and defenseless." The breakdown continued for several minutes, with Amanda acknowledging the full scope of her betrayal and expressing remorse that felt authentic for the first time since this nightmare began. "I destroyed our family and dishonored our grandmother's memory because I was too proud to ask for help and too scared to face my problems honestly. Judge Morrison sentenced Amanda to 18 months in county jail with possibility of early release for good behavior, followed by 3 years of probation and 500 hours of community service working with elder care facilities. The sentence was more lenient than the maximum penalty, but severe enough to reflect the seriousness of her crimes. During the sentencing phase, something unexpected emerged that provided another layer of healing to this tragic situation. The court clerk presented a sealed envelope that had been discovered in Grandmother Rose's safe deposit box during the estate investigation. Inside was a letter dated just 1 week before her death, written during a period of mental clarity between medication doses. The letter was addressed to the court and provided instructions for what should happen if anyone challenged her real will. I am writing this letter because I fear my granddaughter Amanda may try to pressure me into changing my estate planning. The letter began. I want the court to know that my final wishes are expressed in the will I created 6 months ago with my longtime attorney, Harrison Walsh. But the most surprising part of the letter was what came next. I have also established a separate trust fund of $50,000, specifically for Amanda to be released only if she seeks professional help for the gambling addiction that is destroying her marriage and driving these desperate actions. Grandmother Rose had known about Brad's gambling problems and Amanda's growing desperation, and even in her weakened state, she had tried to provide a path toward healing and redemption. The trust fund would pay for residential gambling addiction treatment for Brad and financial counseling for both of them if Amanda chose to access it. The letter also contained instructions for me. Deirdre, my dear granddaughter, I hope this house brings you joy and serves as a foundation for the beautiful life you deserve. Please remember that forgiveness is not weakness, and family bonds can be rebuilt through honest communication and mutual respect. Reading Grandmother Rose's final words in open court brought tears to everyone present, including Amanda's attorney and several court staff members. Her wisdom and compassion, even in the face of betrayal, provided a roadmap for potential healing that none of us had expected. After the sentencing, my parents approached me in the courthouse hallway with expressions of shame and determination. "We want to make this right," my father said simply. "We failed you and Rose both, and we need to learn how to be better parents and grandparents." They had enrolled in family counseling and were committed to addressing the favoritism and manipulation that had enabled Amanda's behavior for years. Patricia handed me a letter they had written, apologizing specifically for their failure to support me during the investigation and acknowledging how their bias had traumatized me further. "We don't expect forgiveness immediately," she said quietly, "but we hope you'll give us the opportunity to earn back your trust over time." Meanwhile, Franklin Morris received a much harsher sentence of 5 years in state prison for his role in multiple inheritance fraud schemes. The investigation had uncovered over 20 elderly victims whose families had been systematically robbed through similar manipulation tactics. Amanda's case became a catalyst for new legislation strengthening protections for elderly persons against inheritance fraud, with specific requirements for multiple witnesses and competency evaluations when wills are changed during medical treatment or in care facilities. 6 weeks after the sentencing, I received a letter from Amanda in jail. Her handwriting was shaky, but her words carried the same authenticity as her courtroom breakdown. "Deirdre," she wrote, "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I need you to know that seeing the pain I caused you was worse than any legal consequence I could face. You sacrificed everything for Grandmother Rose, and you honored her in ways I never understood until it was too late." The letter continued. "I've applied for the treatment program Rose set up through her trust fund. Brad is getting help for his gambling addiction, and we're learning to build an honest relationship for the first time in years. I don't know if our family can ever be whole again, but I want to try to become someone worthy of the love you and Rose always showed me." Reading her words, I felt the first stirrings of hope that the sister I remembered from childhood might still exist beneath the desperation and manipulation that had consumed her. Forgiveness would be a long process, but Amanda's willingness to face her mistakes honestly was a beginning. The house was officially transferred to my ownership through probate court, along with Grandmother Rose's savings and personal belongings. But more importantly, the truth had been revealed, and justice had been served in a way that honored her memory and created possibilities for family healing. Standing in the courthouse where this nightmare had begun, I realized that Grandmother Rose's final gift wasn't just the house or the financial inheritance. It was the wisdom to understand that love sometimes requires difficult choices, that forgiveness doesn't mean accepting abuse, and that real family relationships must be built on honesty and mutual respect. 6 months later, I stood on the wraparound porch of Grandmother Rose's Victorian house, my house now, watching the sunrise paint the sky in shades of gold and pink that reminded me of the stained glass windows she had loved so much. The restoration work was nearly complete, bringing the 1892 craftsmanship back to its original glory, while adding modern conveniences that would make it a comfortable home for years to come. The house had become more than just my inheritance. It had transformed into a symbol of justice, family healing, and new beginnings that honored the past while embracing the future. Every room told the story of our family's journey through betrayal toward redemption, and the walls that had witnessed so much pain were now filled with hope and possibility. Amanda had been released from jail after serving 14 months, having earned early release through exemplary behavior and completion of financial responsibility courses. She and Brad had successfully completed the addiction treatment program funded by Grandmother Rose's Trust, and they were slowly rebuilding their lives based on honesty rather than desperation. Their first visit to the house after her release had been awkward and emotional, with Amanda breaking down in tears as she stood in Grandmother Rose's restored bedroom. "I can't believe she still loved me enough to provide a way back," she whispered, touching the mahogany vanity where I had discovered the real will. We were building a new relationship step by step, one that acknowledged the damage she had caused while creating space for genuine change and growth. Amanda was working as a victim advocate for elderly abuse prevention, using her experience to help other families recognize and stop inheritance fraud schemes. "I can never undo what I did to Rose or to you," she told me during one of our monthly coffee meetings. "But I can make sure other families don't go through what we experienced." My parents had also undergone significant transformation through family counseling and their own commitment to understanding how favoritism had poisoned our family dynamics for decades. They spent time at the house every Sunday, helping with garden restoration and sharing memories of happier times while acknowledging the mistakes that had led to our crisis. "We robbed ourselves of knowing the amazing woman you became," my mother said one afternoon as we planted roses in Grandmother's memorial garden. "We were so focused on Amanda's external success that we missed the strength and integrity you developed through caring for Rose." The healing process hadn't been easy or quick, but it was genuine and ongoing. We were learning to communicate honestly about our feelings, to address conflicts directly instead of through manipulation, and to value character over appearances in ways we had never managed before. Mrs. Henderson had become my unofficial advisor and closest friend, sharing stories about Grandmother Rose's younger years while helping me understand the family dynamics that had shaped all of us. Her presence provided continuity between past and future, ensuring that Rose's memory remained central to the house's evolving story. "Your grandmother always said this house needed to be filled with love and laughter again," Mrs. Henderson told me while we reviewed architectural plans for the guest room renovation. "She'd be so proud to see what you're building here." The house was indeed filling with life again in ways that honored its heritage while creating new traditions. I had started hosting Sunday dinners for extended family, including cousins and aunts who had been caught in Amanda's web of lies, but were now rebuilding relationships based on truth and transparency. Most surprisingly, I had reconnected with Marcus, my former boyfriend who had moved to Denver years ago when I chose to stay with Grandmother Rose. He had seen the news coverage of Amanda's arrest and reached out with a simple message: I always knew you made the right choice to care for your grandmother. I hope you're okay." Our reconnection had been gradual and careful, built on the foundation of who we had both become during our years apart, rather than trying to reclaim what we had lost. Marcus had developed his own appreciation for family sacrifice through caring for his aging parents, and he understood the strength required to make difficult choices for love rather than convenience. I spent years thinking I had missed out on adventure by staying here. I told him during one of his visits to see the restored house, but I realize now that the greatest adventure was learning to love someone unconditionally and finding the courage to fight for what's right. The house had also become a gathering place for other families dealing with elder abuse situations. Amanda's case had inspired legislation requiring additional safeguards for elderly persons making estate planning changes, and I had become an advocate for stronger protections and support systems. Working with the district attorney's office and local social services, I helped establish support groups for family members, navigating inheritance disputes and elder abuse situations. The Victorian parlor where Grandmother Rose had entertained friends now hosted monthly meetings where families shared resources and strategies for protecting vulnerable relatives. Every person we help honors Rose's memory. I told the support group during our 6-month anniversary meeting. She believed in fighting for justice and protecting those who couldn't protect themselves. The financial aspects of my inheritance had also created opportunities to make a meaningful difference in my community. Grandmother Rose's savings, combined with the house's increased value after restoration, provided me with resources to establish a scholarship fund for young people who chose to delay career opportunities in order to care for aging family members. Education shouldn't be postponed indefinitely because of caregiving responsibilities, I explained to the scholarship committee. This fund helps students pursue their dreams while honoring the sacrifice they made for their families. On quiet evenings, I often sat in the library where Grandmother Rose and I had shared so many peaceful afternoons, surrounded by the books she had collected over 93 years of curious living. The room felt filled with her presence and wisdom, reminding me that love is demonstrated through actions rather than words, and that integrity is worth fighting for, regardless of the personal cost. The stained glass windows still painted rainbow patterns across the hardwood floors when afternoon sunlight hit them just right, and I had learned to see those moments as messages from Grandmother Rose that justice, healing, and love could transform even the darkest situations into something beautiful. Amanda's betrayal had nearly destroyed our family, but Grandmother Rose's wisdom and preparation had provided a path toward restoration that none of us could have imagined. The house had become a symbol of justice, served relationships rebuilt, and love that endures beyond death and betrayal. As I prepared for bed each night in the house where I had learned to become a woman of strength and integrity, I felt deep gratitude for every difficult lesson and unexpected blessing that had brought me to this moment of peace and possibility. The greatest lesson Grandmother Rose had taught me was that true family is built on respect, honesty, and mutual care, rather than just blood relations. Sometimes fighting for what's right requires standing alone temporarily, but integrity ultimately attracts genuine love and support from people who value character over convenience. Forgiveness doesn't require accepting abuse, and setting boundaries can actually heal relationships by forcing honesty and accountability. The family I had now was smaller than the one I had before Amanda's betrayal, but it was genuine and healthy in ways our previous relationships had never been. Most importantly, I had learned that home isn't just a place you inherit. It's a foundation you build through love, sacrifice, and unwavering commitment to protecting what matters most. Grandmother Rose had given me more than a house. She'd given me the courage to fight for justice and the wisdom to transform pain into purpose. Standing in her bedroom one final time before turning off the lights, I whispered the same promise I made to her every night. I'll take care of this house and this family, Rose. I'll make sure your legacy of love and justice continues for generations to come. The house settled into peaceful silence around me, filled with memories of struggle and triumph, loss and restoration, betrayal and redemption. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and opportunities to honor the lessons I'd learned, but tonight I felt complete contentment knowing that Grandmother Rose's final wishes had been fulfilled and her faith in my strength had been justified. Her greatest gift hadn't been the Victorian house or the financial inheritance. It had been the opportunity to discover my own capacity for courage, integrity, and love that endures beyond any test or trial. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where you had to choose between keeping peace in your family and standing up for what you knew was right? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear about your experiences with family challenges and how you found the courage to do what was necessary. If this story resonated with you, please give it a like, subscribe for more family stories, and share it with someone who might need to hear about the power of standing up for justice, even when it costs everything. Thank you for joining me on this journey of healing and hope, and I wish you the courage to fight for what matters most in your own life.